afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to say we'd love for everyone to tell us where you are from and just a little bit about you in the chat, if you all don't mind. Um, and we will get started. We are very excited about this presentation today. It is always so wonderful to hear from Mr. Ken Harris. He is just a wealth of knowledge and resources. So Ken Harris is the founder and director of Mocha Fathers and Families Institute and principal of the newly launched consultant firm, the EMU Consultants, LLC. His immediate past job was as vice president for engagement and community partnerships at NICHQ in Boston, where he was the director and principal investigator of the Healthy Start TA and Support Center funded by HRSA, Maternal and Child Health Bureau. His professional career in MCH and public health spans almost 35 years. Ken is two-time past president of the National Healthy Start Association. Ken is a national expert in the field of maternal and child health, public health, fatherhood, male involvement, community engagement, community consortium development. He worked on My Brother's Keeper, the President Obama initiative to address the health of boys and men of color. And he's also has expertise and interest in topics of impact of racism on health outcomes, equity, addressing men's health in the age of mass incarceration. So Ken co-authored and published an article, The Health of Young African American Men, that was published in JAMA in 2015. He continues to research Black men's health and focuses on the integration of health services into programs for men and fathers. Ken remains passionate about women's health, children, fathers, and families, as well as the health and well being of the communities in which they live, learn, play, and pray. So, if you all would help me to welcome Mr. Ken Harris.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bug, and it's so exciting to be here at the request of you all at Rose, my friends and family there, to be part of today's webinar with MHLIC. So thank you so much. And if I could have power to share the screen, I can share the slides. But as I'm getting that power to share, again, as you heard in my introduction, I am no longer at NICHQ. And so although my job there has ended, my work of course, has not. And I'm so grateful, just blessed, and really most privileged to be among you all today, this and wonderful MCH community, which really has held me for over 3.5 decades. So it's exciting to be with you all today as I begin today's webinar with a gratitude. And I like to begin with gratitude. So I'm grateful to each and every person that decided to be here today for this important conversation, webinar, but really a conversation. We won't be able to talk through to each other throughout, but certainly as we go through the webinar, I hope that you can make some considerations and have some conversation with me. I'm hoping not only to touch your mind, but I'm hoping to touch your heart as well, because when we talk about community engagement, authentic community engagement, it really is a matter of the heart, in my opinion, and not just an intellectual exercise. And so I'm really happy that you all are here. And again, it's nice to be, and I've launched my new organization. So again, just to be with you all today is really historical for me, and I am truly, truly grateful. So let's go ahead and get started. I now have the opportunity to share my screen with you, which I will do, and we'll get started. So I'm going to invite you to be prepared to be active in the chat as much as you can. Feel free to put questions, and my friends and colleagues, Andrea, and those that are supporting us for today's webinar will be looking at the chat, and there are questions that we can squeeze in. We certainly will do that, and I'll try to, not try, but I'll definitely leave some time at the end to get some of those questions about, but we promise just to collect those questions. I like to make a commitment to answering the questions even post webinar, and so I'm really interested in questions that you may have. So please feel free to share those questions in the chat and be ready to engage in the chat. I'm going to also invite you to have a blank piece of paper, a pad of paper, because I do want to inspire some thinking around strategies for authentic community engagement, and you may have some ideas as we're going through today's session today. So with that, let's go ahead and let's get started. I want to start with a wonderful quote here. This is a very important year for me. I was born in 1964, and so my father was an organizer. So lately, especially, I've been thinking a lot about just my life in general, and I knew that 2024 was going to be an important year for me, and so far it has turned out to be just that. But I want to start with this quote. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. And so I want to start with community now more than ever. I feel that really, really strongly even today. Community now more than ever. I also want to start by just jumping out of the gate with regards to equity, because that's in our title today. And I'm going to start with a quote from Dr. Lauren Smith, who's at the CDC Foundation. And with regards to my slides, and you'll get these, but I have links to lots of the resources and videos, YouTube article shows and articles. So once you get it, you'll be able to tap right in. But there's a great, great conversation that she, along with a few others, had at the Urban Institute, and they're doing some terrific work around authentic community engagement. So I also want to point you to resources. I'm not the only voice. I'm just one of those voices crying in the wilderness. But this quote says, equity is intertwined in the idea of authentic community engagement. And I love that because, again, we're talking about, we're calling it out, but actually it is actually part of authentic community engagement when we think of equity. And it should be one of those core elements that's part of what we're going to talk about today. And so we have this promise of equity. We hear it all the time, but delivering in the practice of equity, which is what we want to get into, because people promise a lot of things, but they don't necessarily practice it. So promise comes with words, right? Practice comes with action. And so we want to move from words to action. And this is about equity for all. Some people are still struggling after all these years of talking about equity. They still don't understand that it's for all. And we were zeroing on specific groups. It's in context of all, because if any of us are suffering, all of us are suffering. So equity is for all. And it's because of the inequity among many. That's why we're striving for equity for all, because there are inequities among far too many people. And then these disparities, these alarming disparities that we look at each and every single day, they're here because of those inequities that have given way to these great disparities. And these disparities are rooted in inequalities. And that is why talking about authentic community engagement is important. And then the practice of equity in it, right? The actions that are really a part of what authentic community engagement looks like. And so going back to this promise of equity, right? We have to move from the promise to the practice. And hopefully you're encouraged to do that after today's webinar. And we talk about this promise. Basically, we need to deliver on the promise. And when it comes to the practice, we need to put power into the practice. We need to see it for real, though, as they say from my community back in the day. So acknowledging the impact of the historical experience of communities where we see gross disparities, that's important. When you want to put it into practice, we have to begin with acknowledging the historical impact on some communities. And this should bring us to a place of humility, which is critical if you intend to be authentic in your engagement. And that is still a problem in America, right? Not everyone wants to acknowledge this history. And that is a problem because it needs to begin there with that humility in order to have this authentic community engagement. So the power of authentic community engagement, I love that because I really believe in it. And I can tell you, being born in 1964, today I have lived that. And I'm grateful for authentic community engagement. And you see Frederick Douglass' quote I put here too, where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe. Authentic community engagement is safe. And so let's not just talk about it, but let's be about it. And so I invite you to get nestled in and let's get into this conversation. I'm not going to apologize for moments you might feel uncomfortable, because it's uncomfortable for me to have to talk about some things, but I am going to invite us to be in community together and to sit with each other today. We want to deliver on the promise. And again, as I said, today, this year's 60-year anniversary of the civil rights. My hope today is that we deliver on the promise. So that act was born out of discrimination, violence, and conflict. Today, we're still dealing with that in too many communities. And that is why we have to talk about authentic community engagement. So fist to 5, but we're going to use the chat instead, and like 0 to 5, 5 being a greatest and 0 being the least. But just answer this question even for yourself. And if you don't put in the chat, that's fine. But just as we begin today for yourself, what is your level of understanding of community engagement as far as you're concerned? When you think about community engagement, how would you really characterize your level of understanding of community engagement? 0 to 5. And it'll be nice just to see our community today. So if you can, go ahead and just drop that in the chat. Anywhere, the number from 0 to 5, just the number is good enough. And we can have an idea of who we are as a community today. But again, 0, I don't know anything about community engagement. Where 5, I've been doing this for a while, and I understand it pretty well. So just 0 to 5, what is your level of understanding of community engagement? And then after you answer that question, let's talk about authentic community engagement. If you think it's different, I do. On a scale of 0 to 5, what do you think about authentic community engagement, that term itself? And then just the practice of that. How do you understand it? Okay, so that's just to start out, and just for yourself and for all of us as we look. And so our learning goals today really want to deepen your understanding by referencing some of the historical impacts of authentic community engagement and the potential effect on community betterment. Also, we want to increase your knowledge of authentic community engagement by really describing beliefs, values, and principles of authentic community engagement. And then I hope you'll imagine and then implement authentic community engagement as a strategy to really address infant and maternal mortality. And then also we hope to equip ourselves to be better engage those with lived experience and the broader community, including men and fathers, with greater authenticity. So that's what we're looking to do today. And so with that, I say, everyone, welcome to the table. And so when it comes to community engagement, right, community engagement framework is about 4 things. It's about the engagement, it's about inclusion, it's about participation and involvement. As I said, I'm not here to give you a lesson on community engagement, because you know that already, and there are so many resources out there to help us. But I just want to remind us of that framework. We're talking about engagement, we're talking about really inclusion and participation, we'll talk about, and then just involvement. And the strategies that we use with that in order to be genuine are really, you come to the table, you look around, you say, well, who's missing? That's the first piece. Who's missing from your work when it comes to the community being represented at that table? And then if everyone's not there, you can begin by making an engagement plan, target some outreach. We need to get this person or that group, this organization. And then you have to also go where people are. Many times we wait for people to come to us. We call that community engagement, waiting to come to your office, come to your place. But it's time for people to get out and go into community. And so go where people are, and then also make processes more accessible and meaningful. That is the beginning of community engagement and being authentic. So welcome to the table. So I don't know about you all, but in my faith and practice, I'm Judeo-Christian, but I've also had the blessing as a child to attend Hebrew school. And I've learned about sitting Shiva with my Jewish friends and family. But Shiva is like during the time of loss, where you actually go and you sit with families. And it's just really providing space for healing. And so it's just a practice that I brought into my community engagement work, because I find that it's really important to be able to sit with folks. And for me, it became what I call the Ezekiel 3:15 principle. It's just going someplace and being with folks and sitting. Don't say nothing. Don't come with your 2 cents, your advice. You should have done this. No, just come and sit in silence for 7 days. And I really loved that when I was younger. And I've continued to use that as a principle to learn how to just sit in space with people, especially when they're experiencing some deep distress. And so when we sit Shiva, there's a few things I think are important that we can bring into authentic community engagement. One is to be fully present. So you come, and we know about doulas, right? And traditional doulas come and they just there. They do whatever is needed, just being present. You don't have to ask, hey, what do you need? No, I see the house needs cleaning. I'll start cleaning the house, things like that. But being fully present and then just to sit with people. I think acknowledging the pain is important. I'm here because I know that you're going through, and so my presence is here to support you. You want to listen without judgment. All of these are important when it comes to authentic community engagement. No fixing, because some of us are just the fixer. We don't need a fixer. Just listen without judgment. And then when the opportunity presents, then you can share and then offer that support and then make true connection. And in many of our cultures, touching is important. So when it's welcomed and okay, then you can hug, you can hold hands. Touch is important. So you make connections in the ways that it's appropriate in those settings. And so I just wanted to start with that because a lot of those values and practices of Shiva come into authentic community engagement. So foundational perspective, community exists when people who are interdependent, like struggle with the traditions that really bind them and the interests that separate them so that they can realize a future that is an improvement on their present. So really coming together, struggling through, and then creating a vision for the future. That's a foundational perspective on community engagement. And so let's talk about the word authentic, to being genuine or bona fide. So being and actually and exactly what is claimed. So this brings up truth and honesty, right? Be who you say you are. So authentic, right? And then also it implies being fully trustworthy. And we talk a lot about community not being trusting of others. And there's a reasons, and people act as if there's not a reason. Why is the community not trusting us? Well, we need to look at the experience and the history and acknowledge and understand there's a reason. And I think we have to also respond to what the community is saying. You have to become trustworthy. So some of us sitting here today are going to have to think about how can I become more trustworthy? Because authentic implies being fully trustworthy. So the engagement is being authenticated as well, verified. Like when we apply for certain credit cards and things like that, they have to authenticate who you are and the truth of what you've been saying. But some people get offended when the community wants to authenticate you or validate you. But engagement is about being authenticated, right? So becoming authenticated, and many of us should know that when you're working at organizations and they don't have good relationship with the community, but here you are working for them, how do you become authenticated in that situation? So many don't like to being asked to prove yourself or show me. But I go back to the wonderful movie that people love. But Jerry, on the phone, Jerry saying, I'm ready, I'm ready. But Rod says to him, I want to make sure you're ready, brother. Show me the money. So you can do that talking all the time, but we have to actually demonstrate. So show me, be real authentic. You have to actually come through. And that's what we find out in that Jerry Maguire movie, right? So show me the money is about being authenticated, if you will. So authenticating, you authenticate people, processes, because people are promised a certain process, and then when things don't go that way, it's pretty disappointing. Policies we put in place, but how do you enforce policies? So the way they're written helps. And then the practices. So we authenticate people, processes, policies, and practices. And so authentic engagement. The challenge is many try to make transitional authentic, but it's not. Many people are just accustomed to being transactional in your relationships. Authentic community engagement is not that at all. And you can't make the transactional authentic. You just cannot. We have to really put the effort in to move from transactional to human-centered, getting back to humanity. And that's what the effort is with authentic engagement. So if you're used to doing things in a transactional way, part of the learning is now I need to really learn how to move from this transactional to more human-centered. Authentic engagement is what I call, it's like there's a stickiness to it. When it's real, it'll stick. And there's something about when it's there. And I say, people, find the honey or the sweet stuff. There's certain relationships, there's something that sticks. There's something I like about this person or I like about this community because there's something real that's there. And I call that stickiness. And that's what I mean. There's something about this engagement that sticks because, again, people are following through on their word. That actually really intensifies connection. And those that have relationships with your family members, your children, your spouse, or loved ones, you kind of get that idea of what stickiness I'm talking about. But we have to find the honey or the sweet stuff in authentic engagement. And so it is tied to an issue, authentic engagement. It's tied to purpose. It's tied to commitment, to something that's greater than self-interest. So again, I'm coming to the table, but it's not my agenda. I'm being open to kind of what's possible here and really creating something powerful in this engagement. And that makes it authentic, it makes it real, and it makes it ours as we've come together in partnership. So it sticks to something, these values, the beliefs, things that are in community that we kind of become attached to. It's something that sticks to us, where we're now fighting for the community in the same way community fights for itself, because our connection is really authentic. So authentic engagement also is motivated from the heart. So there's the head, the heart, and the hand. But authentic community engagement has to come from the heart because, again, it deals with our beliefs and our values because we project those on others. And so it is important to understand that with authentic community engagement. And so we get to use words like truth, love, and justice. And when you get engaged with the community in an authentic way, you're going to hear those words, and people are not afraid to use those. You need to be honest up front. So truth is there. Love, if you don't love my community, then you really can't help my community, because people in the community, they love it so much that they give their lives for their communities. And that's what you're going to see in true community. And then justice is always fighting for justice and fighting together. So again, authentic engagement about truth, love, and justice. So the engagement then of authenticity, how do we do that? It's a type of or focus of engagement, right? It's a pathway toward authenticity. And again, it begins with the head, the heart, and the hands. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And that's where the practice comes in. What I understand here, is it connected to my heart? And if it is, then what I do with my hands becomes the practice. And remember the turtle and the hare, it takes time. And that's what we need to remember about this engagement. It takes time. It requires a commitment to being there throughout. You can't come and, I wanted to go help the community, they didn't respond to me, and then you give up or you don't come again. Or you go to the community and they say, hey, we don't like you, you shouldn't be here. And you're like, oh, I won't ever go back. But you accept the fact they don't know you, so they don't like you. So you go back and you try to build. So it takes time, it requires this commitment, and then it's strengthened by this dedication. So again, it's in the practice. When people see you're committed and dedicated to this, then you'll see the fruit of that labor. So strengthened by dedication. The question is dedication to what? And here's a place where you can begin to think about writing some things down. So this dedication to what? Dedication to accountability. And again, many don't like to be held accountable by community, but it's important that there has to be this accountability factor. And then what does that look like? And so you have to spend time. What does accountability look like? That's what the community is going to say. How do we hold this entity accountable to our community? And really listing that out. And if you're doing community engagement work, that's what you're doing as a community leader. Like, what do we want to get from this? That accountability piece. So it's clearly written. And I think that's important. You have to be committed and dedicated to accountability, to respecting the community, because again, there's such disrespect that goes on. And because disrespect is allowed, and if you've been around this country, lived long enough, you know that the disrespect was even legalized. And so again, how do we bring respect to what you're doing and what I'm doing as we go into community? And then how do we bring back honor? Because community for many of us is very sacred. And so when these abrasive approaches come in, it's like you're dishonoring my community. So you don't think my home is sacred. So when you come here to do a home visit, your attitude really matters here. And so again, we talk about honor. It's about sacred. Community is sacred to many of us that really practice community. So this dedication to accountability, to respect and honor, and spending time thinking about what does that mean to you and what does that mean to community can be a good place to start too. Understanding accountability, understanding respect, and also honor. And so accountability, respect, and honor really gets to the depths of authentic community engagement. And so I talked before, it's about our beliefs, it's about our values, and it's about our thinking, because that then leads to our behavior. Right. And so if I don't believe, and I work with young boys in my 20s, when my early work, working with young boys, and you try to, help them, avert prison. But I found out back in the 80s, you all, that young boys didn't think they were going to, in Boston, did not think they were going to live long. And so they didn't believe that their life was worth it because I'm not going to be around long. And so because of that belief, I didn't value what I did. And so I lived reckless. I did reckless things because that my thinking was I'll be dead soon. And that led to their behavior. And so what we found in our work, we had to deal with their beliefs first. They didn't believe they mattered. They didn't believe they were worth it. And so the value they placed on themselves was low. And so their thinking about themselves was low, and their behavior showed that. And so again, the work is deep. When it comes to authentic community engagement, it's about people's beliefs. If you don't really believe in this community, you don't believe in the people in this community, you don't value that community, then how in the world can you be authentic in your engagement? And so the depths of authentic community engagement is around beliefs, around values and thinking, and then it gets to behavior. And what we really want to do is, again, we think about the behavior, these things that are like shared, aligned, and mobilized, right? Our beliefs, shared, aligned, and mobilized. And this is where transformation happens, because it's when we think differently, then you behave differently. But your thinking, of course, is influenced by your beliefs and your values. And so that's where you have to do that deep work of authentic engagement. If you want to transform how people are thinking about the community, then they'll behave differently. So if you want to get to that practice, you have to really transform the way people are thinking, because if the practice is not there, then something's wrong with how people are thinking about communities. And if you really want to authentically engage, then you need to deal with the beliefs and values. And so that's where transformation can happen. And that's when you'll do things that are really powerful and sustaining as well. And so there's a breadth of community engagement, then the depth of it. And so what I've just described helps us think about the depth of it. So think about what I just said around the beliefs, values, thinking, and then that behavior. And so usually, things come from top down, or they can come grassroots and move up. And so the thing is to think about these coming together. So we need things to happen at that top level, that policy level perhaps, but we also need things that come from the community level. And the sweet stuff, as I said, looking for that sweet stuff, things that stick, is like in the middle. And so how do we bring those two together? For the breadth and depth of what we're up to, how do we bring it together where things are flowing from the top, but they're also flowing up and coming together? And that's where the alignment and the synergy can happen. And that's the real sweet stuff and the good stuff. And it's like we often think about change as coming from the top down, or if that's just from bottom up. But community engagement is most effective when the two meet in the middle. And that's where the magic is in the middle. I call that the good stuff. And authentic community engagement is all about moving communities and organizations to the good stuff, just like an Oreo cookie. You guys, I never liked Oreo cookies. I wasn't a chocolate fan, but hearing about people with Oreo cookies separating and getting to the white stuff, the good stuff. One day I had those, and I've been eating Oreo cookies for the last 10 years. I love me some Oreos because I'm also excited about the good stuff. And so that's where you want to go. Where does the sweet stuff, where are we really making connections in the community? So that's about relationships, right? And so let's talk about relationships. So people are at the center of authentic community engagement. And this cartoon says, have you been putting yourself in other people's shoes? That's like that Ezekiel 3:15 principle I talked about. And that's it. Do you put yourself in other people's shoes to try to understand? That's what it's about. And building those kinds of relationships are part of this. So authentic community engagement, right? Increasing your knowledge of that community, seeking to understand that community. And sometimes this means starting with knowledge of yourself. And so people want to get into authentic community engagement, but are you authentic in who you are? And that's a big question. I know I deal with it for myself, right? Now, what do I know about myself? What am I thinking about that community? What do I believe about that community? Are my actions aligned with what I'm saying? So I think that self-assessment is so important as you begin to go out and do authentic community engagement. Sometimes it starts with ourselves. How do you show up in community matters as well. So again, if you have your thoughts, your biases, et cetera, that's going to show up when you go out into community and when you're engaging folks from the community. So again, it's really important to start with self and think about how you show up in community. And if you come in with unchecked biases, the potential to do damage is multifold. And sometimes you don't even know what kind of damage you're causing because you think I have good intentions, I'm trying to do the right thing. But again, unchecked biases can lead us to causing damage, and you have no idea what you've done. But sometimes it causes a disconnection, and then you never are able to regain that. So the question to ask then is, how do you sit in community authentically? And so that's, I think, beginning with ourselves, our own beliefs, values, how we're looking at community. All these things are really important to consider, to ask the question, how do I sit in community? How do I put myself in other people's shoes? What do I need to do? What is that all about? So I think that's a good question to start with. How do you sit in community authentically? For me, it's becoming community. So authentic engagement for me has been, I need to become community because we become part of different communities. I'm connected with lots of different communities because I've become community. Because when you engage authentically, you'll find that connection is there, and you become part of the community. You'll feel that welcome, the invitation, the welcome, and then you're going to feel a sense of community in different places and spaces. And it's wonderful to be authentically engaged. So becoming community is the way that you sit there. And so just take a moment now, like 30 seconds. What does this mean to you to become community then? Ken has said we need to become community. Just whatever it means to you in this moment, become community, because that's my answer. You have to actually become community. You can't just be spectating all the time. How do you actually become part of community and still be authentically you? Because that's what makes community vibrant, that it grows with diversity, et cetera. You still can be yourself. You don't have to give up anything when you're in an authentic community. So what does it mean to become community? So just write that down and hold that. And so I want you now then to list 5 personal values that you have, right? We talked about this: beliefs, values, thinking, and behavior. But just on a piece of paper, write down 5 personal values that you have that are like are really important to you. I value my family, you know, 5 things. Just write those down. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that while I breathe. Okay. So you have those 5 things written down. Now, asterisks 2 that are super, super essential to you. I know all 5 are important because you have more values than 5, but are there 2 there that you would start like, this is really important? Like for me, I said family first, and family is mine. Let me tell you, my wife and my son, absolutely. And then all my other children associated. But my wife, oh, big time. So she has 2 asterisks, actually. So if you mess with my wife, you really are asking for trouble. So put an asterisk next to those that are really, really essential. Like family is really, really important to me. Above my job, above anything, my family is just essential. I value my family. All right. Now I want you to circle out of the 5, all 5, circle the ones that really align with your organization's values. Are you someone who's decided to work where you work because your values align with that organization? And if you are, which values of your organization align with yours personally? Because I think with authentic community engagement, it's personal. It's not just organizational or program. It is so personal because it connects with who we are. And so just look at that list, and I wonder if the ones that you put an asterisk to are also ones that your organization has as well. So it's just a simple exercise, values. And if we're in person, we'd kind of be paired up or grouped up just to make connections with folks. Because even in a diverse group, when we list those just like 5, 7 values, and you go around a room, you'll start finding yourself connecting with other people that may not look like you and have the same values. And so it's a great way of bringing community together because we realize we have more in common. And so aligning around our values. So again, it's a simple exercise for us to do for ourselves now, but definitely you can expand on the idea. But alignment of values, making connection is what this is about. And so one of my hearts in a community that I'm associated with really focuses on Black girls. And I was excited with this new organization started out, IB Black Girl. And I know they're one of MHLIC's grantees. And the work that they're doing is incredible. In fact, just 2 months ago, they've opened up their building, their center. I'm really excited about the work that they do. And again, it's a reproductive justice organization that leads with boldness innovation, and inspiration, actively creating a radical change-making culture that centers Black women, femmes, and girls. This, to me, is one of the new, bold, exciting examples of what authentic engagement looks like, to see this organization and what they've done in such a short period of time. But for me, they're very reflective of what I want to emphasize when it comes to being authentic and encouraging young women, femmes, girls to be authentic and creating that space for them to be able to do that. I think is just awesome. So again, I want to lift up organizations like this in my work. And I did this last time, and I'll always do it. I support this organization. So why is authentic community engagement important? Why organizations like that really emphasize this type of engagement? It's because we have to address the crookedness that are in systems. The crookedness that's in systems. And there's a great article that I have a resource here for you to look at, but it references Melissa Harris Perry's quote. And again, thinking about the crookedness that's in system for many. But she says African-American women are standing in a room skewed by stereotypes that deny their humanity and distort them into ugly caricatures of their true selves. As they struggle to find the upright in this crooked room, they are beset by the emotional, physiological, political consequences of race and gender shaming. This shaming has tangible, even disastrous consequence. So when we talk about authentically engagement, and this quote, and with Melissa Harris Perry, where I looked at it for years because the work that I've done in women's health, I've always thought about it when I think of women of color, especially Black women and poor women that I knew in the programs that I've been with, is how they're treated when they come into an office or a clinic, or when people come into their homes, just the disrespect that I've seen them getting. And again, someone has power, of their words have power over their lives, where they decided she behaved a certain way and their children can be taken immediately, or the havoc can be wreaked in their lives. And so adjusting to the crookedness. And so hearing even, moms over the years talk about, well, I didn't say anything because I knew if I did, that would cause a big scene. So adjusting to the crookedness is so unfair. And so there's a need for authentic community engagement, because no one should have to adjust to the crookedness of anyone's system just to avoid the violence that they may get as a result of standing up for themselves. And so this authentic community engagement, it's about that, changing the system and addressing the crookedness in systems. And that's what those that engage with authentic community, that's what this is about as well, because no one should have to adjust to the crookedness, because not everyone goes through that, but some people in this country, because of what they look like, have to really get services in crooked systems. So we want to address that. I think Jackson's model and the research, embracing identity and cultivating success, is a great model to look at when we talk about realigning the crooked room. So I wanted to point that out, and you'll have as a resource later. But let's talk about perception and perspective, because we're to the left, you're here, whether you're at local, state, national level, wherever you sit. Let's think about ourselves, and let's think about how we look at mothers as an example. Right? We have our perception of these mothers in your work. But around mothers, there's family. There's support systems around these moms that could include their partners, male partners, or any other partner. There's neighborhoods that these moms live in that could be supporting them. And there's a community around them. But sometimes our perception is we don't see all of that good stuff around them because of our biases about a group of people. And so our perception of these folks are like really skewed because of our biases about a group of people. And so authentic community engagement is about removing that lens, that bias, so that we can then see the community around them, the neighborhoods around them, the support systems, and the family. But if you've come from an experience where it's been deficit, 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 then you don't see those realms around her as support, as assets. And so asset-based is important to think about authentic community engagement, because you begin to see the assets of the community that's around these families, the neighborhoods that are there, the culture that's represented there, the support systems, those that are around these moms and babies, helping them navigate life, become a value now. And then also the family is an asset. So again, this beliefs, values lead to how we think about moms and the community around them. So it's very important to address our perception and our perspective of these moms and kind of remove that bias, that lens of bias, and begin to see, have a different perspective on these moms. And so being present in community, like, so how do you see community? So again, take 30 seconds to think about the community that you serve. How do you see that community? Like, what's your perception and perspective of that community? As you think about the work that you do, you're doing it, it's motivated because you have a perception or perspective. What is that? How do you see community in your work? Is a good, important question. And the one thing I want to say here is we can't improve maternal and child health without engaging community voices. And I think people are starting to pay attention to that. We hear a lot of folks making sure they engage the folks of lived experience of the voices. But again, we can't really improve maternal and child health without engaging those voices, without practicing true, authentic community engagement. I mean, it's a shame in this country we have to have a Hear Her campaign, and we still are amplifying that message because people are still not listening to women, women of color, Black women, Indigenous women. They're still just not listening. And so it's so important that we practice true, authentic engagement. And this holds whether seeking to change at a policy level or within the organization, hospital, or clinic. We have to be more inclusive, which is also embedded in authentic community engagement. So when we think about authentic community engagement, this belief behind community engagement is that people impacted by the problem have some of the best solutions. There are things that you would not think of if you are not part of a community, things that you just don't know that the community knows. And so thinking of a community with solutions, and community helps us understand how they experience the system, their lived experience, and that's not something we can learn anywhere else. So when those experiences and those voices become part of the solution, when they're combined with organizational knowledge, resource, and expertise, it becomes a pretty amazing partnership that inspires that innovative thinking. Innovation is not showing up if it's just us all the time. We have to really include community to get that innovation, things that we would not even think of unless we're engaged. So that true partnership is really part of this authentic community engagement. And when solutions are genuinely designed in collaboration with affected communities, it is possible to shift power, to change systems, and to advance equity. To shift power, change systems, and advance equity. And power, shifting power is a big thing because people don't want to get into that with community engagement, but it's a very important piece of authentic community engagement. And so even thinking of those of you that are working in state and community, so think about those partnerships. Community engagement at the grassroots level, again, where we talk about organizations and individuals working together, inspires that community-based change, but too often this change doesn't trickle up. And so I showed you that a little earlier. It just doesn't always trickle up. So without systems change, grassroots initiatives can't really experience that maximum impact, right? Because even the strongest community-based program can't fully thrive in a flawed system. So helping policymakers and state leaders connect with grassroots community efforts results in the greater impact. And that, again, is the demonstration of what a true authentic community engagement looks like. And so I would encourage us to prioritize the 3 Ps, as I call them. And I'm a child of the Sesame Street area, so I like bringing up words today. The words are brought to you by the letter P. So think of 3 Ps to prioritize, whether you're bringing together a meeting of community partners or engaging families. Prioritize place, people, and practices. And when place represents creating this space for the community engagement to happen. So it should be a space that is inviting and respectful, so people actually feel comfortable and valued. Welcoming decorations, snacks, meals. These are things we've learned that are really add value to the place, a space that really can accommodate children. And again, these considerations help lay the groundwork for this authentic engagement. When you prioritize the people means really ensuring the right people come together. So as we started today, that table, who's at the table? This relies on thoughtfully discussing how to connect with your community partners, consider their individual circumstances and what might make it difficult for them to attend a meeting or join a call, and really thinking through how to create and engage an enjoyable event, whatever it is. And then, of course, the practices. The practices are those rules of engagement, if you will, the agreed upon policies or practice that really create that safe space for engagement, right? For a clinic prioritizing family engagement, this might mean implementing a policy for greeting families when they come through the door. And that is great. It's nice to be welcomed to a place when you step in. So that may be something you put into practice. For a community meeting, this might mean just policies that guide behavior, such as how we're going to facilitate inclusive discussion, you speak twice, step back once, whatever rules you have, but whatever practices you want to create. So full engagement means giving up the power. And so I want to get into this. So there's a spectrum of community engagement, and not everyone knows that. And people are used to and comfortable with just kind of advisory, tapping into the community for a little advice here and there. But true community engagement actually has a spectrum level of engagement. And the goal is to really achieve that maximum level of community engagement, which is really around decision making. And there's a couple of resources I can point you to in a moment. But it begins at the advisory level, then it moves up to like focus groups, and then helping to influence decision making. And then at that full engagement level, it leads to the decision making and truly helping determine what happens. And so that's really the goal of authentic community engagement, is really to have that full level of engagement. And full engagement is the most authentic and it's the most powerful. But promoting it requires shifting that power from whoever's leading the initiative, like it could be the clinician or researcher, organizational lead, but really shifting that to the community. And for true engagement, you have to be willing to give up the power. And that's a piece by itself, right? Are you willing to give up power? I was working with an organization that will want to diversify their organization and be committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I asked for a list of their board members, and all of the board members were white. And I said, well, you're working in a diverse community. You want to be reflective of that. I said, talk to some board members and ask which one of them are willing to give up their seats. So some of them need to leave the board. And they were just like shocked. And they were like, we can't do that. I was like, well, then you're not ready. But giving up power is a big deal for some. So we talk about sharing power, but that isn't enough. Again, move from those words, move to practice. And so I can't share power unless I'm willing to give up some of it, right? And this is the risk because we lose some of the control and we have to be vulnerable. But it's what it takes to have true partnership, and ultimately builds that momentum that'll cause you to go further together than you could ever go alone. And so in organizations, communities have done that. They've seen great success and impact, but you have to be willing to give up that power. So when it comes to engagement and leadership, efforts to achieve a revitalized communities of opportunity will not be successful without substantial community engagement. And again, meaningful community engagement requires this participation in the governance, how things are going, and decision-making, as I've said. And again, we have great examples of an importance and how to engage community, but aligning our knowledge and practice to build a connected force of community change. So again, community engagement, this process where residents are engaged to learn and work together on behalf of their communities to create and realize bold visions for the future. And so elements that I'm sure you know of, but just to repeat them in connection with this section around community engagement, creating that culture of collaboration, identifying those assets and those partners that are needed in this work for us, improving birth outcomes and eliminating these disparities and inequities that we see. And involves empowering participants, tapping into those networks, again, seeing all those assets, partnering with community leaders, those that are doing the work on the ground day to day, the boots on the ground, people that know, and they should be respected because they're there. They are there every single day committed to this work. And so again, partnering with those folks and not coming in to kind of step in front of them, but really work alongside. And then of course, nurturing new relationships. And so here is something, a schematic that's from the International Association for Public Participation, something I've been using for years. And again, some resources are put into the presentation for you later. But this is the example of what I meant by that full spectrum of engagement. So you can have community folks that just inform a few things. You can consult with them. You can start to involve them. You can move to the collaboration. But the empowerment is that maximum level we talked about. So again, moving from just having them inform you to having them involved to move to that high level of engagement, which really is around decision making. And so providing the public with some of the information. Hey, we got this grant, we're doing this, we would love to know what you think about it, is one thing, but really moving to that high level is important. Involvement is good, right? People are doing great, and there's definitely that more involvement of community, but again, moving to that full level is really where you want to go. That decision making is there. So another way of think about the promise, again, we talked about deliver on the promise. The promise at the informed level is that we'll keep you informed on what's happening. The promise as a consultant level is really we will listen and acknowledge your concerns. When you get to involve, you're saying we will work with you to ensure your concerns and aspirations are directly reflected in the decisions that we make. At that collaborate stage, it's like we will look to you for your advice and your innovation and incorporate this into the decisions as much as possible. But the promise is we're going to implement what you decide because you're part of that decision making. So again, it's just an example of seeing the levels, the spectrum of engagement, and the goal is to really empower. This I won't go through, but connected to that are values and ethics. And so I think that's helpful to look at as you're building your own work and how to really put in values and ethics that really align with your beliefs around community engagement. And so again, Sherry Arnstein in 1969 created this lesson participation, which is great. But this and what she said, like participation is like eating spinach. No one is against it in principle because it's good for you. So people want this community engagement. They know it's good for us. But when it really starts to happen, some people back away from it. And you can read the rest of that. But I want to read the middle here. Citizen participation is citizen power. Without an authentic reallocation of power in the form of money or decision-making authority, for example, participation merely allows power holders to claim that all sides were considered, but makes it possible for only some of those sides to benefit. It maintains the status quo. So again, having this promise of authentic community engagement, but not delivering on it, it's doing nothing but continuing the status quo. And so again, I want us to look back in order to leap forward. This is not new work, new conversation. It's been going on for decades. So always remember to trust the process. Trust the process. Authentic community engagement, the kind that has the depth that really works, it takes time. So if you aren't interested in it, like don't start it. Like you have to believe that community engagement matters. You have to trust in the process and not rush it for results. And so here's a pre-check that you can use. And I'll ask you this question. So let's follow through and see how you do. Before you jump out there doing it, let's check our perspective. My perception of the community. Like, how do I see this community? What are my beliefs about this community that I'm serving? Is it where it needs to be? What do I see in this community? Do I see value? Or I don't see value? What's my perspective of this community? Another thing you want to check, my understanding and knowledge of the community. What do I know about this community? Like, and then what do I understand? I know this happened, but do I understand its impact? And I understand what people are. I mean, how deep is your understanding, right? And knowledge of the community. And then straight up, how do I feel about this community? You know, I don't have to be from that community to love. I love this community. I want to support. I want to give myself. So how do you feel about the community? There's another question. Some people have no connection to the community. And that's a person, I don't know how authentic you'll be in your engagement, but is there something? What do you feel about this community? So do you see value in and of the community? That's an important checkpoint. And then am I ready to engage authentically? So again, if I'm not there personally, am I ready to engage with the community? So these are like pre-check, this quick questions to ask oneself before you kind of jump out there to do this work. Because again, it sounds good. You know, everyone knows it's a good thing to do. I know I should be doing it, but am I ready to do it? So check yourself. And in my neighborhood, they used to say, check yourself before you. And if everyone could yell out right now, I'm sure you're going to say, check yourself before you what? Wreck yourself. Yep, you hear that all the time. And that's important. Before you jump out there, please check yourself. And so I mentioned these words earlier, but this love, respect, and honor. So approach communities with humility, because some approach it with judgment, some with disdain, and some come in as that they're the savior of the community. No, approach with humility, right? Because the potential harm is there if you don't, and the potential exasperation. The community has had enough. And some people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. They're just tired of it, this rhetoric, right? Become trustworthy, as we talked earlier. Authentic community engagement. So the big thing is seeing the power shift. That's when you know it's real, where there's really this mutuality is there, the equity is there, it's present, it's showing, right? Because the power has shifted. So becoming community, that's the stickiness. And that's what happens because when you give up power and you begin to work together, you're actually bonding in a way, and you actually are stuck together in different ways. It's like we are equals in this, and it feels wonderful. So becoming the community is a stickiness, and you begin to say, I'm really part of this. I'm really welcome to him, and I'm here authentically in myself, my identity, and it feels great when we're authentically engaged. So it's locked in engagement. You can get engaged with people this way, but locked in makes it hard. And so people that have been married for a long time, like myself, every day hasn't been easy, but because it's locked in engagement, I can't let her go and she can't let me go. Thank God she has not let me go. But that's an idea of what locked in engagement is. Like we're going to have challenges, all of that, but we can get through it because the engagement is locked in. And that's what happens with authentic community engagement. So again, think about the elements of authentic engagement. Like, is there a difference between just community engagement, authentic community engagement? I think so, because we're to emphasize, this needs to be real, is all we're saying, right? And then what's the difference between the two? Right? What's the difference between the two? And so Brian Stevenson tells us to get proximate. Proximity is getting close to the people and the places that experience exclusion and suffering. That's what's important, that we get close and we get involved. Getting close to people and places extends beyond spatial proximity, and proximity is about building intentional relationships and others, engaging in deep listening, increasing understanding, and building trust and grappling together, as we talked earlier. So we think of the workforce also when it comes to authentic community engagement, and think of those who are working in the spaces. And when we have authentic engagement, even in the workforce, this increases chances that engagement will be authentic. When people look like, feel like, act like the community, it makes a big difference to see people from community in positions where they're working in their communities. And we need to really make space for diversifying our workforce, that it's reflective of the community, it's inclusive of community, and that it's responsive. It can be better responsive to our community. Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That connection, that's the stickiness I'm talking about. Something stuck to me from being in that doctor's office. I didn't like all the receptionist wasn't nice, but when I was in the doctor's office, I actually felt they saw me. There was something about, I don't remember everything they told me, but they made me feel human in that moment. So that's stickiness, and that's the connection we want to make. And so how do we achieve authentic community engagement? So again, as I said earlier, move from transactional, right? This just business as usual, to transformational. We've talked about that. Your values and your beliefs leads to your thinking. And if the thinking needs to change, go deep on that and transform the way you think, and your behavior is going to follow. Being transactional means that there's an expectation that if one gives, one will receive, right? And that narcissist in a relationship, right? Everything is transactional. A narcissist in a relationship that doesn't do nice things for their partner because they care about them. They do it just to receive praise and validation. And we see this, right? People come in to help the community, and if you don't celebrate them or name a street after them, they're like, oh, they didn't appreciate me. Not so. Don't look for something. So ties that bind us, our shared humanity, that's important when authentic community engagement is achieved. But have you ever felt a kinship towards humankind in general rather than just with a select group? So you think about connection to other human beings. Yeah. And admit it or not, some of us grew up thinking that some groups of people are better than others. So this also makes love for humanity, or being in authentic relationship with community, one of the most difficult kinds of love. Because if you've been told a whole lot of things about this group that's caused this separation, how do you work to get rid of that so you can be authentic in what you do on the planet and in this work? So truth telling is part of authentic community engagement, right? It happens when there is authentic community engagement, truth telling. acknowledgement of the harm. And with structural racism, we have to acknowledge the harm that's been done to a certain group. So again, if you don't love me, you really can't help me. If you don't value me, if I don't matter to you, we have to have a whole Black Lives Matter movement. Why? Because some think that Black folks don't matter. Black babies dying, doesn't matter. Black mamas dying at a higher rate, doesn't matter, right? So if you don't love me, you can't really help me. You don't do authentic, you become it. And so you have to be true in the work, which means being true to you. And if it's not you, it's just not you. If you want to do authentic engagement, then you should be work toward being an authentic human being, not a perfect human being, just be authentic, right? It's a way of being. Let's be authentic. Here are resources that I want to point to, some good resources that I like and support and want to really put out there from the Urban Institute, as I said earlier, other principles of engagement done by the CDC and other places. So those are there in your slides. Information and communication, it's two ways with authentic community engagement, right? And always remember that. Equity, we talk about equity in this work, so this power sharing, that's important. And so there's a resource here from Social Innovations that's there. How am I doing on time, Andrea?
You are doing well. It's 2 o'clock on the dot.
Perfect. Okay, I'm wrapping it up. So I wanted folks just to think about the civil rights movement. As I said, this is an important year for me, and I've been thinking a lot about the civil rights movement and thinking of stories that I share with my father, who's no longer with us, but some of his friends I talk with, and they're older, in their 70s, 80s, and my mother-in-law, who's 90, having these conversations about what was going on and just putting all that stuff together just for a thought for me today and talking about authentic community engagement, because I think of the engagement that was necessary for the success of the civil rights movement. It was authentic community engagement at every level. So those of you that are old enough, just think about, even just from 1956 all the way to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, just the kinds of things that went on in community, the diverse community as well, that led to that. But I remember being younger, but we heard this when President Lyndon Johnson spoke after Selma, Alabama. And in his remarks that were televised, he said in his closing words, he invoked a rallying cry of the civil rights movement. And he said, their cause must be our cause too. He said, referring to the civil rights activists, he says, all of us must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice, and we shall overcome. I remember when I was younger, I was like, that white man said we shall overcome? Because I just heard that in church and in rallies when I was younger. But when my father shared this address with us as young kids, as we talked about different things in our lives, I was like, okay, again, more folks as community were involved and engaged. And so I think this is a great example of what authentic community engagement looks like. And that line, their cause must be our cause too, because you have to really become part of that community. And I think of the non-Black activists in my family growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, and then in Boston. It was so many different people, diverse group of folks that were part of the community addressing the issues of racism in my life. And it just underscores the importance of becoming community. There's no limit. Anyone can become community if you're real and authentic. You'll be welcomed. So when we think of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, again, Rosa Parks, right? This markers of what authentic community engagement look like. Just wanted to reference that, not to go into it. Again, success of community engagement, just examples, because I want to just people to think about, are there examples of really what it looks like? Well, yeah, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Brown decision in 1954, the Voting Rights of 1965, all great examples. And when you look at the history and go into the depths of that history, you're going to see it was authentic community engagement. When you think of the Montgomery bus boycott, you're going to see that as well. Rosa got kicked off the bus in 1943, not because she was old and tired, but she was tired of being mistreated. Claudette Colvin, right, was 15 years old, refused to go to the back of the bus in March 1955. So it wasn't just Rosa. Mary Louise Smith refused to go to the back of the bus in October of that year. Rosa Parks refused to go back to the bus again in 1955, right? And then there was Aurelia Browder and Susan McDonald before the case actually went to Supreme Court. So a lot of people involved. So who really led the Montgomery boycott? Wasn't one person. People like to say Rosa, but there was a whole community, authentic community engagement of many. And there were many things that needed to happen to make that successful. Again, the boycott, 40,000 Black bus riders refused to ride those buses. People were organized, carpools, all kinds of things were happening in the community when they were on that strike. So again, either for me or against me. And that was the kind of the call back in the day. If you want to be with us authentically, then get with us and be with us. But if not, you're against me. The Underground Railroad, another example of authentic community engagement, right? So who led that? People will say one person, right? But again, this cooperation, coordination, and love, really, right? The railroad should not be thought of, however, as one cohesive body. It was a fact of an ever-evolving organization devoted to one cause. Again, community come together for this one cause, protecting other human beings. And so, yes, we know Harriet Tubman, but the Underground Railroad was a vast network of people who helped fugitive slaves escape, right? Over 100,000 slaves between 1810 and 1850 made it safely. As we see, it was the power of voices and action together. The power of voices, the possibilities of coordination, and then the presence of people to do authentic engagement. 7 things to take out from that. Authentic community comes together around causes that we're all concerned about. And we certainly, infant mortality, maternal mortality, human dignity, justice, reproductive health. There's a cause for us to be all concerned about. We need to come together authentically around that. Community, let's create this community together. Compassion, we have to have compassion, this care and empathy for others around us. And when people join communities by choice, you join the cause to be part of something. You choose to do that. And then the collaboration comes, working together for all. And the commitment is there. And that's where the success comes, because we're committed. We're going to do this regardless, and we're going to go through and get through. And we see that with some of the things that I've mentioned, examples that I've given you. The commitment led to great success and ultimately leads to the change, or what we want to say, the transformation for community betterment. Ubuntu, I am because we all are. And that's what authentic community engagement is about. Those of you that have been around, you may remember the movie Stormy Weather. The song Stormy Weather was in the first all-Black cast movie. And the history of that, there's so many people that committed to that happening. And it's just powerful, but I'm not going to share that today. But do research it and check out that movie. But think about when you see that all-Black cast, that celebration and the joy that you see in the faces of the performers, the singers, the dancers. It was all because of this engagement work that went on outside and commitment to making sure that we do this on our own. It was powerful. As we think about equity, I also want to point us to another important person to lift up in this work of almost 40 years or more, is Angela Glover Blackwell. And she wrote a piece for FSG, the people who do collective impact, and she talked about the equity imperative. And that is definitely something I wanted to point you all towards, because in it, she makes a powerful comments. And she also spoke at a keynote entitled Equity Matters in Collective Impact. So people want to do collective impact, but she was saying equity matters there. And she says the work of equity is to create the conditions that enable just and fair inclusion into a society in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. And I encourage us today in our conversation around equity and authentic community engagement. This is important, the work of it, what equity should be doing in this work that we're doing around authentic community engagement is said very well here by Angela. So it's not about singular leadership, but rather collective leadership. It's together makes the community. So with this authentic engagement, we bring it together, we work it together, and we keep it together. And then you can move to sustaining the work together. And then we all win in the end. So that's that authentic engagement, motivating and mobilizing, leadership inspiring, as well as leadership navigating. So Before I close, I wanted to talk about father engagement a little bit, and because I was asked to, and so I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I certainly wanted to say a few words about it. My colleagues at Rose asked me to do that, and so it's hard to think about a father's role in MCH without really acknowledging his role in family health and well-being. And so this challenge is great for Black and Brown fathers especially. And so the question is, how can we authentically engage these fathers, right? So we have to see his values and think about what I've shared today. Think about his value. And when he has been devalued and rendered invisible in MCH, it's important to understand how to make room for him in a system that was not designed for him. So our moms and babies are trying to survive in crooked systems, and here he is trying to get in a system that wasn't designed for him. And that's what makes it challenging when we talk about MCH in particular. So here's a quick quiz. Name a country that's built on the genocide of one race and the enslavement of another. Can you name that a country that's built on the genocide of one race and the enslavement of another? You might have the answer. So I wanted to share with you, you may not know fatherhood in MCH. And when I'm talking fathers, I'm talking African-American, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hispanic fathers, in particular, Black and Brown fathers, the story across the timeline. Just remember, MCH started in 1912, right? And so our real head start on the fatherhood work. The fatherhood movement didn't get kicked off really until the 90s. And so when we talk about equity, right, just think about that alone. And so again, policies have not caught up to support happy father and healthy father engagement. In 1975, we had the establishment of the Child Enforcement Agency, which hasn't changed its practices in those 40 years, 50 years. And so again, just to give you an idea, but think again about the history of African Americans from 1619 and think about the genocide of our indigenous brothers and sisters. And when you do work in incarceration, you're going to see there are more Black and Brown men in prison than any other group. The largest group of Black and Brown are African American and American Indian men. And again, we know 90% of men in prison happen to be fathers. So the impact on family is huge. And so I think the equity, looking at prison reform, there's so much to do around fathers, and certainly we didn't have time today, but I wanted to put that out there for you to think about, even when we talk about equity and engaging fathers. And so that's important to consider, 20th century father versus what we need to do now. And so I do want to share this with you because I think it captures the important piece of fatherhood work in this country at this time, especially when it comes to Black and Brown men. So I'm going to catch my breath and give you about 2 minutes to check this out.
All rise.
So we've done the research on fathers engaged in MCH. And so the question is, what's going on with Black and Brown fathers? We have to explore that before we can get to the conversation on equity. We also know we have research to support that dads have tremendous value in MCH, but we have to address attitudes of inclusion, these perception of men and fathers, and the misperceptions of them, the myths and the folklore about some groups of people, the bias, conscious and unconscious, and also the criminalization of men of color in this country and the commodification of Black bodies. So again, what's going on with Black and brown fathers is a question we need to ask, and I encourage you to explore it. He needs to be involved, and we need to acknowledge that he has value. We know that families are stronger together. And we talk about Black families in particular. For me, the impact of enslavement on Black family formation, there's a legacy that still exists today. There's shame, the trauma, the oppression, and pain associated with Black fatherhood is real. This bounty on Black body, Black lives, in fact, incarceration, continued killings, and disease and death that we carry the burden of. Grateful for people like Dr. Roberts, right, who are writing about these things. And again, we think of this long history of separating families in America and how the trauma lingers. During slavery, endless atrocities were enacted against enslaved Black people. From rape to senseless beatings, treating of our ancestors like worthless scraps was part of the daily grind. Let's not talk about the enslaved Blacks. Let's talk about our brothers and sisters, indigenous population. I can say the same thing, right? During genocide, endless atrocities were enacted against these people, right? From rape to senseless beatings, treating our ancestors like worthless scraps as part of the daily grind. There's a legacy that lives today. We've rendered him invisible. So the question is, when you think of Black and brown men, how visible are they to you? And if, again, last thing we'll do in the chat, but just drop in the chat, visible or invisible or very visible. Just write an answer. How visible are Black fathers to you in the work that you do? So the question to answer for us now in the 21st century is no longer do fathers fit into maternal child health, but more of how and when do they fit? The term MCH does not include fathers, so the big work around fatherhood is inclusion, you all. There's a growing research to support father involvement that demonstrate the value. And so the truth is, they're stronger together. The truth is, fatherhood does matter. The truth is, as I began, there's an urgency of now. When we think of maternal mortality, infant mortality, incarceration, there is an urgency of now. So before inclusion, think about his exclusion, address biases about Black and men and fathers, and we'll be able to get into the work of and release. Make fathers part of the whole. That's what inclusion is. Really move from exclusion to inclusion. And so I ask you as I close to think about your constellation alignment today. What are the resources that are in your orbit that are working for you? Who is supporting the work that you want to do around authentic community engagement? And understanding what the community wants. And what do you want from the community? And then how do you create that alignment? I encourage you to create a vision with community as partners for now and beyond. I end with the simple truth that now more than ever, we are called to the work of active hope and ceaseless pursuit of the beloved community. Again, it's community now more than ever. So thank you. Be authentic in your work. You've got this. I'm now known as just the emu guy. Thank you so much, Rose. Thank you, MHLIC. Thank you, all of you, for being here with me today. Andrea, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ken. Wonderful, wonderful presentation as usual. And even if it's a topic that I may have sat in with you before, it is always a refreshed presentation. There's something always new to glean from it, and you always add something new to it. So I definitely appreciate you, just like I'm sure many of the participants here as well. The webinar chat has been live with a lot of dialogue. For certain, amen corner going on with the information you were sharing. It deeply resonated with a lot of individuals with a lot of great feedback. I think one good question I want to start off with before I get to the two in the Q&A, which I think will help with shaping the responses for the Q&A. Someone did ask, how are you defining transactional relationships? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
For me, it's when I use the word transactional, I think of when I go into the bank. I don't necessarily have to talk with you. I'm just doing what you know I want to do. I want to do a withdrawal. I don't have to say anything. I can do the withdrawal. No human connection. So simply for me, transactional is without emotion and connection. So I do the work that I'm assigned to do, and that's all. I don't do anything more, and I'm able to check I did that. Ken came in. He asked for change for a 20. I gave him, 2 5s, and that was it. So no connection. So transactions is the deed or whatever the work is and no more, and not being connected in any way. So that disconnect transaction can be so cold.
Love it. And so I think that helps to set up for this question that was asked in the Q&A chat, which is, and you could also pull it up too, because I know sometimes you want to read it. How do you help colleagues who are transactional only understand that their view of how they show up in community does not align with the community's assessment of them as an individual and/or as an organization or program?
Good question, and a tough for me today. So if this is, I'll answer it this way. If someone who recognizes they're only transactional, but they have a willingness to change, I'm going to try to work with you. But if I see you're not willing to, then I've learned. I feel like Maya Angelou, things I've learned with my life. I've learned I am not wasting time anymore in my life trying to move people from being transactional if they don't want to be. So I think if there's a willingness there, I'm just going to be authentically with them. And if they're willing, then let's try it. You need to do better. I'm pointing out this. So I'll work with you. But if I know you're not willing to, I'm casting no pearl among, well, you know the saying. Does that help? I hope that's helpful. This is where I am today, because I had to learn people aren't really willing not to be that way. They just want to do the bare minimum. And if that's what they want to be, then you have to stay there, but you can't authentically engage with me. You won't be going to the party with me. How about that?
Definitely understand, appreciate that. I call it energy dollars. You gotta be
Yes.
mindful of where you allocate your energy dollars. Thank you for that. For the next question, what are your thoughts on the name remaining maternal child health with the movement towards inclusivity of our fathers, but also for our LGBTQ plus parents? I struggle with this.
Yeah, and I think, again, this may reflect my time on the planet too. And because of the struggles that I've had in my life and what I've learned for Black people, I know there's a camp that's trying to change the name. So being in this work for 35, almost 40 years, the name hasn't changed yet. So I don't care about the name. I'm the fish that goes in the opposite direction. If we can be successful in the inclusion piece of all those other groups being part of MCH, I'm fine with that, because I've also grew up in a generation where I honor the women in my life. I honor mothers. I honor women's bodies. So because I have that as a man understanding, I'm fine with MCH personally, because I know the importance of taking care of mothers, birthing people, and children. And my responsibility that I want to contribute to that, I'm good with MCH as long as it's inclusive. I will point out that the Maternal Child Health Bureau's Healthy Start program is the first MCH program in this country that made fatherhood a required component. The name did not change, but they put policies in place. They made funding available, where we have father coordinators all around the country now because they made a change to include him. And that to me is really powerful. The name hasn't changed, but if we can achieve the inclusion piece of other groups as well, and I think we're making room for everyone, I'm cool with that, because, you can call me anything. What I answer to is another thing. So that's my response to that question.
Thank you. The next question is, where can we find the video that was shared during the fatherhood piece of the presentation? Is that linked into your PowerPoint?
It's linked in the PowerPoint, and it's also by Procter & Gamble.
Okay, awesome. And so the PowerPoints and webinar will be shared, and so you all should be able to access that. The next question here is, how do you promote authentic community engagement in a predominantly white workspace, who sometimes may find it hard to see equity versus equality?
Yeah, that's hard, but I think the commitment to be authentic in spaces is what should drive and motivate us, and do it and remain healthy, because it's work. And if know that it's your season to do the work, because there was a season in my life that I did the work, but staying healthy in it. So you don't, being authentic means I'm gonna be committed to trying to bring some change here, but doing it in a healthy way is what I would say. Because sometimes it's being a soldier in the work to kind of bring that transformation to an organization or space. But just being healthy about it, I think, and wise to me is important. So.
For that. Dr. Bug, did you want to ask your question before I go to the next question?
I did just quickly. One of the webinars that we did here at MHLIC addressed that. So when you get a chance, whoever answered that question, look at Amelia. How you say Amelia's last name? You know, but she should be in the webinar. And
she unfortunately did not want hers recorded.
Oh, she didn't. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought we had her information. Okay, we'll work on that though, and doing a community of practice
Yes.
or something with her.
Dr. Bug, did she talk about fatigue as well?
So yeah, what she does is talk to white people specifically about their biases and prejudices. And she actually has a course where she goes through like for 6 weeks with that with her affinity group.
Mm-hmm.
And so she did do a presentation on that, but we were not able to record it. But
okay. So Tim Wise, and so you all, as another resource, then Tim Wise, who's a white activist, and Tim's great work he's done over the decades, but also as a white man in the space doing the same kind of thing you describe Amelia must have done. But that's another resource people can check out. And he wrote White Like Me, the book, and then he's done a whole presentation. So, okay.
Awesome, awesome. The next question is, how can we best improve interactions with fathers, even outside our work? I've noticed that my own interactions with fathers, even in my personal life, are a bit awkward, maybe inauthentic. Maybe this starts with changing interactions in our personal life first that we can bring to our work.
Sounds like that person answered the question, right? Because it's really starting there. And I want to call out my brother, Kenneth Scarborough, who I've done a lot of work with in our early days, like 25 years ago, when we started working the fatherhood and working with all women work groups and whatnot. We had this exact conversation, and that's what we arrived at, really dealing with our own thoughts and ideas and feelings about men in our own lives, because they were projecting off on their clients and things like that. So I think that's a great place to start. And that's honesty, right? It's like we know that the father factor in all of our lives is critical, whether he's present, absent, abuse, all kinds of things. And so it's been rich dialogue over the years and having the honest conversation again. And if you are there, I think just beginning with that, if there's one male at the office or a new coordinator that's been hired, even starting conversation with that person, hey, this is just where I am. And again, yesterday I was talking with a woman about fatherhood work, and she just paused and disclosed. She said, well, let me tell you about my experience with the men in my, and she went off for a minute, but we had space for that. And she says, and I know I need to work on that as I'm trying to help. I was like, I'm here for you kind of thing, but it comes up all the time, but that's a great place to start.
Awesome, great, thank you. This next question is, people.
We might have to send those because we write at, and I'm sure Janet has some stuff she has to close out on. So.
No, I mean, just thank you everyone for coming, and thank you so much, Ken. But I think we have 3 minutes left. We can get these questions in.
Yeah. So this question, which I'm sure you often probably get, Ken, is one where people also want proof that the aspects you are presenting on are evidence-based. Does this exist?
I want to say, well, yes, it does, right? But I want to say, like, heck yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And again, some of those resources are there, but if you just look, Google and look for stuff, it'll pop up for you as well. But yes, there's evidence, all the things we've talked about today. As I said, this wasn't about intellectual, because there's enough stuff out there, academia, that's been talking about this stuff. And what I'm looking for, and let me put a plug for this new generation of researchers of color, Black folks and Indigenous folks that are doing new work too. So there's new stuff coming out too. So I'm excited about that.
And I think that might have been the last question. So is there any big takeaway you want us to keep on front of mind as we end out today's webinar?
Yeah, I was with that last question. Again, thanks everyone. Much gratitude. But that last question also makes me think, as we're inviting more lived experience people to be part of our groups, don't cut them off before you get started with them by saying, hey, because again, we want to acknowledge and validate their experience, right? I don't need to have it written and published in a book 10 times, right? They've lived experience, and I want to celebrate and lift it up as high as you lift up anything else. It just comes to mind for me in this moment, because that's one of the fears I have as we move forward in the next 10, 15, 20 years. Now that we're talking lived experience, don't hurt that engagement when people do come to the table, then turn around and say, well, how do you know, Andrew, that really, it's like, didn't I just tell you I lost 3 babies? Didn't I just tell you I want, so I want to end with that by just saying, remember to be real in this work. So
we certainly have plenty of evidence to show that inauthentic community engagement doesn't work. So on that, thank you again, everyone. Thank you for Rose for co-sponsoring this with us. Ken, you have quite the fan club in the chat. There's a love fest going on, and rightly so. And everyone, please just fill out the evaluation forms, and we much appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone.